Welcome to Bengals Nation, where we cut straight to the real football talk. No fluff, no filler. I'm your host, and today, oh man, we've got something wild to unpack. Colin Cowherd. Yeah, you heard that right, just dropped a take that's turning heads. He compared Joe Burrow to Matthew Stafford in Detroit. That's right, 11 seasons, no playoff wins, and an elite QB whose prime years got buried in mediocrity. But Joe Burrow? In Cincinnati? Not even close. And I'll tell you why. Right here, right now. So don't blink. But before we break it all down, do me a quick favor. Subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a major Bengals update. If you bleed orange and black, this is where you belong. Now let's talk facts, not hot takes. Colin might be great at what he does, but this one, completely off the mark. Joe Burrow isn't becoming a franchise QB. He already is one. You want playoff wins? He's got 5. You want composure under pressure? The guy outdueled Mahomes at Arrowhead. You want leadership? Burrow changed the entire culture of Cincinnati football, something Stafford never had the chance to do in Detroit. This comparison doesn't hold up, and we're just getting started. Let's kill the comparison with facts, not feelings. Matthew Stafford spent over a decade in Detroit and never won a single playoff game. 0-3, to be exact. Joe Burrow? He's not just ahead of that curve. He's light years past it. He's only entering year 6, and he's already sitting on a 5-2 playoff record. His only 2 losses. One was in the Super Bowl, and the other came in the AFC Championship. Both razor close. That alone should shut the door on this Burrow equals Stafford nonsense. Now let's go deeper. Burrow isn't just winning games. He's doing it with a stable foundation that Detroit never gave Stafford. From the moment he walked into the league, Zac Taylor has been right there beside him. Same voice, same vision, same mission. Some critics might float the idea that Zac's seat is getting warm. Maybe, maybe not. But unless something goes completely off the rails in 2025, Taylor isn't going anywhere. That kind of continuity? That's gold for a quarterback. And it's a luxury Stafford didn't have in Detroit. So let's be clear. Joe Burrow isn't walking in anyone's footsteps. He's carving his own path, right through the heart of the AFC. Let's talk about the difference stability makes, and why it's a massive advantage Joe Burrow has had from the start. When Matthew Stafford was in Detroit, the man had to survive a coaching carousel. From Jim Schwartz's firestorm approach, to the calm, steady demeanor of Jim Caldwell, to the chaotic mess under Matt Patricia, and the interim stretch with Darrell Bevell, Stafford never had long-term support or a single guiding voice. Now, take Joe Burrow. Since day one in Cincinnati, he's had Zac Taylor at the helm. Same sideline voice, same locker room presence, same overall vision. And even though there's been a switch at offensive coordinator, from Brian Callahan to Dan Pitcher, the system hasn't changed. It's the same offensive DNA, the same rhythm, the same language. For a quarterback, that matters more than people realize. Burrow hasn't had to relearn schemes, readjust to new leadership, or rebuild trust every few years like Stafford had to. That consistency is why the Bengals' offense has been able to evolve instead of reset. And if we're being real, Burrow plays smarter, too. Where Stafford often let his gunslinger mentality lead to risky throws and unnecessary turnovers, Burrow is calculated. He'll take deep shots when they're there, sure, but he protects the football. He reads coverages, understands leverage, and rarely forces it. That's not just skill, that's discipline. Bottom line, Burrow has the structure, the system, and the smarts, and that's why he's nothing like Stafford's Detroit days. Sure, Joe Burrow has had his share of sack fumbles, and no quarterback is immune to mistakes. But when it comes to protecting the football, especially when it matters most, Burrow is miles ahead of where Matthew Stafford was early in his career. Stafford had a habit, especially in tight games, of letting it rip when he didn't need to, and it cost Detroit a lot. He'd make critical turnovers late, drives that could have sealed wins, flipped into losses. Burrow? He's the opposite. He plays under control. Yeah, there were a couple of fourth-quarter turnovers this past year, but those were the exceptions, not the standard. Burrow's instinct is to manage the moment. He understands the game situation, and he doesn't hand the ball away when the lights are brightest. And here's the truth no one can deny. Cincinnati wins with Joe Burrow. Let's look at what Stafford had to deal with. Seasons like 2-14, 4-12, 6-10, 7-9 twice. That was the norm in Detroit. Now look at Burrow's Bengals. His rookie year ended early with a knee injury. Sure, that team went 4-11-1. But then, 10-7, straight to the Super Bowl. The next year, 12 wins and another trip to the AFC title game. Even with injuries around him, this team still hovers around 500 or better. The pattern is clear. Joe Burrow changes the outcome. He doesn't just put up numbers, he elevates the entire team. That's not something you could say about Stafford's Detroit days. So if anyone still thinks Burrow's story is headed towards Stafford's path, they haven't been watching closely enough. Let's address the talk, because it's getting loud. Some fans and analysts love to drag out the old argument. Cincinnati's just a dysfunctional franchise. Same old Bengals. But let's be real. Comparing Joe Burrow's Bengals to Stafford's Lions? It's not just inaccurate. It's lazy. This isn't the same organization from a decade ago. This is a team built to compete right now, with elite pieces in place. You've got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, all top-tier talents. Throw in the firepower on defense with guys like Trey Hendrickson, assuming he stays healthy and involved, and you've got a complete roster. If this team stays healthy, they're a playoff lock. Now, let's pivot to something else stirring the pot. Nick Wright, Cowherd's FS1 colleague, just claimed the Bengals are staring down a third straight year missing the playoffs, and he called that unacceptable with this roster. Why does Nick believe that? One reason. He hated the move to let Lou Anarumo go. And in fairness, Lou was a major piece of Cincinnati's defensive identity, especially against Kansas City. No one in the NFL gave Patrick Mahomes more headaches than Anarumo. We saw it last year again. Week 2, he had the Chiefs completely off rhythm. So, from Nick Wright's perspective, especially as a known Chiefs supporter, it stung to see that kind of defensive mastermind leave the building. But here's the bigger picture. One coaching change doesn't dismantle a championship window, not when Joe Burrow is still leading the charge. This team has too much firepower, too much culture, and too much resolve to be written off. The Bengals don't need media approval. They need Sundays. And when those Sundays come, they show up. Look, Bengals fans understand the reality. Change at defensive coordinator was necessary. No one's denying Lou Anarumo's impact. He was a defensive mastermind and earned every ounce of respect. But the time came for a shift, and that's what happened. Nick Wright argues there's no real reason to believe this team will be any better than last year's 9-8 squad, despite all the talent. He points to Joe Burrow being at full strength, Jamar Chase putting up elite numbers, and yet, no postseason berth. And here's where it gets interesting. Wright says if Burrow regresses even slightly from 100% elite to, say, 95% excellent, that could be enough to keep the Bengals out of playoff contention again. He uses Saquon Barkley as a parallel, a player who had an A++ comeback year, and then came back to earth a little. His argument is, if Joe Burrow doesn't replicate near perfection, what happens then? But here's the counter, and it's a big one. Burrow doesn't need to carry this team on his own. Cincinnati isn't just betting on Joe being Superman again. They're counting on a stronger offensive line, a more versatile defense, and health across key positions. This team isn't built on one man's shoulders. It's built to win in layers. And if Burrow's 95% is still better than most quarterbacks at their peak, you're still looking at a contender. Critics can question it. That's their job. But inside that locker room, there's belief, there's continuity, and there's a quarterback who's already shown he can take this team to the mountaintop. That's what makes the Bengals dangerous, no matter what the talking heads say. Let's be fair. The logic behind the criticism isn't totally baseless. If you're not locked into Cincinnati week to week, you look from a distance and say, they fired Lou Anarumo, the guy who shut down Mahomes, and now they're re-signing the same core, Chase, Higgins, Henderson, guys they already had last year and didn't make the playoffs with. That argument sounds reasonable on paper. But here's what the outsiders don't understand. This Bengals offense is not stagnant. It's evolving. It's not just about returning players. It's about returning chemistry. We've seen this model before with Peyton Manning's Colts, with Tom Brady's Patriots. Elite quarterbacks banking reps year after year with their weapons. The longer they stay together, the more unpredictable they become. Routes evolve. Timing sharpens. Adjustments become second nature. Joe Burrow talked about it just days ago. The offense isn't standing still. It's leveling up. Because guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Burrow himself are no longer just athletes. They're a cohesive unit with high football IQ. Can Burrow match his touchdown totals from 2 years ago? Maybe. Maybe not. But it's not about flashy stats. It's about control, confidence, and execution. The only scenario where this unit takes a step back is the one no fan wants to imagine: an injury to #9. As long as Burrow is healthy and protected, this offense will not regress. It'll get sharper, faster, and more dangerous with every week. Calling this group still is not just wrong. It ignores everything that makes elite football teams great. The Bengals aren't just running it back. They're running it smarter. And now let's talk about the other side of the ball, the defense. Look, say what you want about last season. Was the Bengals' defense frustrating at times? Absolutely. But here's what's not going to happen again. That same unit falling flat 2 years in a row. This group has too much talent, too much pride, and now, a new voice at the top, Al Golden. Yeah, he's coming from the college level. But let's be clear, Al Golden has NFL experience. He's coached under high-pressure systems. And most importantly, he brings a fresh edge this locker room needed. He's not stepping in to rebuild. He's here to refocus a defense that already has the pieces. From veterans like DJ Reader and Trey Hendrickson to rising leaders like Cam Taylor-Britt and Dax Hill. This isn't a broken defense. It just needed a reset. And now it has one. So when people like Nick Wright say they might miss the playoffs again, that's when you know they're watching the headlines, not the film. Doubt the Super Bowl hopes? Fine. That's a big ask in a loaded AFC. But to suggest this team, with Joe Burrow healthy, an offense returning elite weapons, and a defense with a chip on its shoulder, can't even reach the playoffs? That's not analysis. That's laziness. But that's always been the narrative with Cincinnati, hasn't it? From 2021 to 2022, the Bengals were dismissed, overlooked, disrespected. And still, they climbed. So let them sleep. Let the critics write them off again. Because the Bengals aren't built for clicks. They're built to win, and they're not done proving it.